Thank you, ladies and gentlemen and councillors. I'll start with an acknowledgement of country. The City of Ryde acknowledges and pays respects to the many Aboriginal clans on whose traditional lands this city is located and this meeting is being held. Code of Conduct Statement. Council's Code of Conduct provides standards for appropriate behaviour and sanctions for misbehaviour at meetings. Councillors and staff should be aware of the provisions of the Code of Conduct in regards to these matters. Councillors, staff and the public are reminded that this meeting is being recorded on audio tape for minute-taking purposes as authorised by the Local Government Act 1993, and that the meeting is also webcast through Council's website. Councillor Maggio, would you like to offer prayer, as you usually do? I've got it here if you'd like. Yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will bow our heads, please. Almighty God, we bow before you and acknowledge you as creator and ruler over all nations of people, all communities, families and individuals. We seek your blessing this evening and this time on this community which we exercise authority. Grant that we may do so with genuine sense and responsibility and dedication and serve God and humankind to the best of our ability. Guide us to deliberations this evening and that the affairs of this council may be attended to in the spirit and wisdom and service. We ask it in your name. Amen.
Please be seated. Councillors, I've received apologies from Councillors Majali and Yedelian, OAM. There are no leave of absences. Any disclosures of interest? No. Any tabling of petitions? No. Councillors, we now move to public participation on items listed on the agenda. And we have 13 or 14 speakers. Gallery, you have 3 minutes with a reminder bell at 2 and then another bell at the 3 minutes. 11 speakers. So could I please ask Ms Patricia Forsyth, representing the Sydney Business Chamber, speaking on items 1, 2 and 3.
Mayor, councillors, I'm here on behalf of the Sydney Business Chamber, which represents large corporations with an interest in Sydney to be a competitive global city. Many of our members have an interest in Macquarie Park, and for completeness I indicate that Meriton is one of our members. Not to support this development would fly in the face of all of the good strategic work that the Greater Sydney Commission has done to position Sydney for the future as one that we can talk about as a 30-minute city. A 30-minute city is one that gives people options about living and working within 30 minutes. And this development is one that ticks the boxes on all criteria. It is walking distance to the new Transport metro station. It is walking distance to a major shopping centre. It is walking distance to the major employment hub that is Macquarie Park, and is walking distance to the university, to Macquarie University and Macquarie University Hospital. It meets the criteria on every level as a place where you would locate residents near to this important employment park. The notion of a 30-minute city is one where we can do away with the car by bringing people in where they live and work together. And I cannot overemphasise the lost opportunity it would be not to see this development go forward. And in the way it has been designed, it could easily have been a wall of buildings. Instead, in the proposed design, it sought to get balance between the size of the development, open space at ground level. It's taken account of things such as overshadowing, but first and foremost, it is one that is about connecting the people of the area to Macquarie Park. We must get that balance right. The most important thing for the future of Macquarie Park is that it is an employment hub. It is absolutely fundamental to the future of Sydney as a global city. But it cannot be isolated. It cannot be an area without people that can access it. And this site on Talavera Road gives us a great opportunity to link people with where they can work, where they can shop. And you do not need to do that with a car. Most of the opposition is about traffic congestion, and yet I say to you that the notion of placing this near the metro station, near retail, near employment, means that in the long term, as we change the culture of Sydney, we are creating the very type of developments that we need. That is those that are close to the key employment hubs that make up the 30-minute city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Forsyth. I now call on Mr Chris Johnson, speaking on item 2, planning proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Chris Johnson. I'm CEO of the Urban Task Force, a former New South Wales Government Architect, a former Executive Director in the Department of Planning, and someone very much involved in planning of cities. While I'm talking about item 2 on the agenda, that's 112 Talavera Road, Macquarie Park, I believe there's a bigger issue that's at play here. And I think what it's to do with is trying to get rational decision-making rather than emotive decision-making. I've read the rational report by the council officers. I've looked in detail at the proposal. All the rational objective assessors are supportive of the project, including many government agencies, including RMS, Transport, CASA. Council staff recommend the project be approved. In a rational sense, this is a very clear proposal. It's also clear the site is an ideal one for the proposed development. It's minutes from the new metro station, close to a major shopping centre, to a hospital, to a university, to a school, to a local park, to the M2 motorway, and to the vast Lane Cove National Park. And the project proposes in a VPA and in other levies to give over $70 million back to the community. On top of this, there are no suburban houses around the site whose amenity may be compromised. There are amazing jobs within walking distance of the site. Everything seems perfectly aligned for a sensible, rational decision to support this proposal. But there are a number of submissions, around 400 have been submitted. An amazing letter, I believe, from the local Member of Parliament who's raised a lot of concerns, and he says in his letter that he's there raising concerns on behalf of myself and my constituents. It seems to me there has been a bit of an effort to generate a whole lot of constituents to build up in a more emotive, I believe, than more rational sense to put in objections to this particular project. I've looked at the general nature of those, and it seems that the comments from the staff have indicated that most of those can be solved. I note that the applicant has said that they are willing to reduce the height of the building, which I think is a significant point that many have raised. I believe that a tall marker is a good thing to have on a big site like this, on its actual location. But I think the compromise solution is one that I would recommend to council to proceed with. I think in this pre-election environment, it's very important that decision making is made in a straightforward, rational manner based on the quality of the actual project and not getting into emotive pre-election issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Melanie Marcelino, speaking on items 1, 2 and 3.
Good evening, and I guess I need to begin and apologise to everyone in the room for perhaps being an emotive local rather than a rational one. It's extraordinary that once again we're here late at night to discuss this development. Given that ordinary council meetings commence at 7 p.m, the timing of this meeting could easily be seen as an attempt to discourage the community from attending and having their say tonight. Our community is sick and tired of asking our local councillors to do their job and represent us. It's very clear that our community wants no more development. While Meriton has agreed to reduce the height of this development from 63 to 42 stories, Council's own laws only allow for a maximum of 30 stories at this site. To go ahead with this proposal would mean deliberately ignoring what the community has elected you to do. As president of Kent Roads P&C Association, the closest public school to this development, I know that this development will add to our school population and is a source of concern for many of our families. The fact that our state government is addressing Ryde's school infrastructure needs and building many new schools, as well as upgrading others across the electorate, should not be seen as a green light for council to allow for more unsustainable population growth to further fill them. Ryde Council claims that the developer contributions will go to much needed community infrastructure, but there appears to be very little being done by council to address those community infrastructure needs. There are potholes in our local streets, parking is at a premium, and traffic is congested. Council has made no plans to widen roads to alleviate traffic issues or put pedestrian lights in where they're needed, and I think that ratepayers have a right to know where that money is going. It is time for our council and our mayor to stop shifting the blame to everyone else because it's convenient. It's time that council acknowledges the role it's playing in the overdevelopment of Ryde and take the steps needed to put a stop to it. It shouldn't have taken over 12 months for the mayor and some councillors to change their positions. It shouldn't have taken a strongly supported community fight led by our state MP to get you to change your minds. It shouldn't be normal procedure for councillors to secretly discuss multi-million-dollar developments late at night, and you should never have supported it in the first place. Please listen to your community rather than council staff and withdraw your support for this development tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marcelino. Ella and Aaron Marcelino, speaking on the same matter.
Good evening. Our names are Aaron and Ella. While we should be at home as it is quite late, we felt that speaking here tonight is very important. There is a proposal before you to build a 42-storey tower near our home in Ryde, and we don't think that it fits well with the rest of our community. It already takes a while to get to school in the traffic, and some days it's hard to find a parking spot. And with hundreds of people moving into the new development, that's only going to get worse.
We were inspired last week when the Mayor encouraged us to skip school to protest for what we believe our future should look like. We might not be able to vote just yet, but this is where we live and we don't want our future filled with even more towers. Ryde has enough. It's important that young people have a say in community matters, and even more important that our council cares about the future of our area, listens to us and what their decisions mean for us.
We're good friends with our neighbours and we enjoy the sense of community that our area has. We know that a 42-storey tower will destroy that sense of community and change Ryde, so don't support it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella and Aaron. Colin Waring, speaking on item 3.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors and council management. In the name, or in the words of Tim Finn, I see red, I see red, I see red. And it's mainly brake lights of cars. And they're not all from Ryde, they're not all from the surrounding areas, they're from way out of the areas. And they come in and they squeeze, and I'm one of those people that suffers through the same situation. You come down Lane Cove Road from Belrose, it takes 20 minutes to get from Belrose to North Ryde. You hit North Ryde, it takes over 20 minutes to get through Ryde. It's a ridiculous farce, and it's mainly because of the overdevelopment and the mass of people into a small space, which has been approved in the past by the former council, which was run by the opposition, and the former government minister, who was now, or sorry, the former member of council who is now a government minister, who set up the government to allow these planning panels to override and the development, commission, what is it, Greater Sydney Commission, who's also led by Mrs Turnbull. The thing with the problem with this development is that the traffic funnels all out onto Lane Cove Road and Epping Road. Most of the people working from this site will not be working at North Ryde, they'll be working in the city. Let's not delude ourselves, right? Or they'll be working in northwestern Sydney. And the funneling of the traffic towards the city must go on Epping Road and on Lane Cove Road at the moment, because there is no eastbound ramp on the M2 at that point or at Lane Cove Road that can be accessed by traffic, as you'd know. Okay, it has to go all the way up to Delhi Road and try and get on up there, and if not there, it's got to go further up to the Warringah Freeway to get onto the city. And you know, everyone can delude themselves, but it's like Eastwood. Most of the people that come to Eastwood are not from Eastwood. You know, they're from outside the area. So now the other thing is, the towers, it's not the size of the tower, it's the occupancy, the number of people in those structures. And there's no way they're going to give up their cars. It's a modern city. People don't give up their cars. Don't be deluded, right? They're going to want to use it. Now, everyone keeps blaming Mr Dominello or Mr Laxell there, and we can all take politics into it and we can take politics out of it. But the reality is, most of us want a healthy, habitable city where people aren't angry with each other and telling each other off because they're frustrated trying to get home, spend time with their family, their kids and their life. And the biggest problem is we're jamming too many people in a small space without the infrastructure to support it. And one of the most important things that would be needed for this development is an eastbound ramp onto the M2 at that point, or you're just going to funnel it all into the streets around Macquarie Centre, and it's a joke. You won't be able to access the hospital, you won't be able to access uni or any of the other surrounding businesses because of the traffic. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Waring. Ms Julie Worsley, speaking on the same items.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Thanks for this opportunity to address this important issue, once again, overdevelopment. I, like most of the 400 people who wrote a submission, am strongly against a 63-storey tower building being built anywhere in Ryde. And I, like most of the Ryde community, am strongly against overdevelopment. We are carrying too much of our fair share of overdevelopment in Ryde. Frank Sartor's original plan was to have 30,000 extra residences over 25 years. Well, how many are we up to? I actually don't know. Maybe 100,000. I know that's a guess, but hey, it's ridiculous what Ryde is already carrying. We're fed up to the back teeth and we've had enough. It seems that we residents have to come out and fight against every proposed overdevelopment, every building. I've been actively involved in this fight for nearly 10 years, and it's time for MPs, councillors, everyone to listen to us and just say no, N-O, to greedy developers. I'd like to commend Mayor Laxell for listening to the community on this point and changing his stance to encourage us to reject 63 stories. We residents, however, would be equally incensed by any overdevelopment on 112 Talavera Road. The 42 stories now proposed, are 42 stories too many? Is that overdevelopment? Of course it is. It's ridiculous. What about 32? Yes. Now, I took a drive there this afternoon. At 88 Talavera Road, there's another Meriton block, 8 stories. So I would suggest for this particular block we go 8 stories, keeping it consistent with the local area. As individuals, we have loyalties to our family, our God, our country. It's natural that politicians have loyalty to their party. However, it seems to me that with some politicians, loyalty to the party eclipses loyalty to the community that has elected them. I would therefore request that all councillors and all of us check our own hearts to make sure that we're making decisions based on what's expressed by the community, and that being our high priority, rather than our party loyalty or our own advancement. It's a privilege to serve the community, as well as lots of long hours and thankless hard work. But I want to finish by thanking all of you councillors, whether we're on the same political page or not, for your efforts and for putting your hand up to serve the community. But please, keep listening to the community.
Thanks, Ms Wesley. Tim Pinzone, speaking on item 1.
Our community here in Ryde has made it clear that we do not want 60 stories. We also do not want the amended height of 42 stories. We do not want, we do not need, and we will not stop our fight against unscrupulous developers here in Ryde. We also do not want elected councillors being incapable of standing up to these developers. What we do want, however, is our elected officials standing up for us and doing as they promise. We want our elected councillors opposing such ridiculous developments, and we want our councillors to oppose 60 stories, and we want them to do it last year instead of tonight. Instead of opposing this development, this council capitulated to the developers' request to allow 4 towers ranging from 27 to 60 stories without any adequate infrastructure in place, just months after many of these councillors were elected based on their promises of stopping overdevelopment. If developers are willing to take advantage of our community, then we expect elected officials to not allow these developers to do what they want. Instead, you all should have stood up to Meriton and said no, as is your responsibility. This council is elected to represent the community. Representing the community is not requesting an extension in height from 45 stories to 60 stories for some park upgrades. It is not voting this development application through to the gateway process. It is not delaying community consultation by up to 6 months without any explanation and then giving everyone only 27 days to have their say, all because the mayor is afraid that it's going to wash up right up onto his state election campaign. Representing the community is not blaming others or the state government for decisions that all of you consciously made. Representing the community is doing what is right and doing what is in the best interests for the community, which in this case is opposing these towers. It's time to take responsibility for the mistakes that were made, and it's time to withdraw your support. 63 stories, 60 stories, 42 stories, it doesn't matter. It does not fit within community expectations. All these figures are above local planning laws initiated by Ryde Council. We cannot allow developers to take advantage of these laws, and doing so is betraying the public interest and is a disgraceful abandonment of the people that elected all of you. Furthermore, if we are willing to succumb to developers here and permit 42 stories, not only do we set a precedent that it's okay to break local planning laws, it can also be used by developers to eventually build it to 60 stories. For example, if we permit this 42 story, we can go to 45 stories and then eventually 50 stories because we went to 45 and then 55, and we can keep building up, and eventually it just becomes okay to approve 60 stories and we go right back to where we started. So Mayor Jerome McSayle and Ryde councillors, please, for the benefit of your community, withdraw your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Pinzone. Sophie Lara Watson, speaking on the same item.
Whilst I thank the Mayor for changing his mind on these towers after a strong fight led by Victor Dominello and Councillor Jordan Lane, I and many others in the community feel that this stinks of political expediency and it's a little too late. From November last year to a fortnight ago, the Mayor was radio silent on this issue. He said it was the best deal for ratepayers and that Council had no choice but to accept the VPA. Whilst then, Mayor did reject the VPA for Hallmark's 49-storey towers at 66 Talavera Road 7 times before eventually supporting it on the 6th of April 2017 and slashing housing affordability by 54%. He also said he couldn't fight against the towers because it would preempt the council vote. We did see councillors Lane, Brown, Yedallian and Magellan punished by the Office of Local Government for fighting for their community. And so the Mayor slapped the ratepayers with a bill for up to $50,000 to try and keep Council Lane silent. It would have been far cheaper for you to just join him and fight over development. I never saw you with a petition or a flyer in your hand. Further, you happily spoke to the Land and Environment Council twice against the development on 6 Lexington Place, despite still requiring a council vote, and said you backflip now that the community opposed against you is community opposition is so against you. It's a shame you went backflip on other VPAs you have strongly supported over the years, which have violated council planning laws. This includes, strap yourselves in, this 20-storey tower at 388 Lane Cove Road, which you supported on the 10th of March, despite it being 9 stories higher than allowed. The four towers of 23 stories at 101 Waterloo Road, which you supported on the 13th of December 2016, despite each tower being 3 stories higher than allowed. And the 13-storey tower you proposed for Eastwood Plaza, which you supported on the 27th of February this year, despite being 3 stories higher than allowed. Is it the point of an EPL if all these developments are continually approved for money? Is this the legacy you want to leave for your kids? You are a leader of this council and you are unable to convince staff to reject this proposal. Now we have a recommendation for 42 stories, which does not only create a dangerous precedent for future developments, but gives ammunition for developers to ask for more at the Land and Environment Court. Mr. Mayor, you cannot claim this victory tonight when your council has put us through so much unnecessary pain. I ask that you all vote against this tonight, but keep in mind that if it is not simply But keep in mind that it is not so simple as to blame the state government. You have much to answer for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Laura Watson. Ms. Divya Alawat.
Good evening, councillors. I speak tonight as someone who genuinely values what the community has to say, and thus I am disgusted at the complete and utter lack of community consultation undertaken during this entire process. For anyone that is unaware, council allowed the statutory minimum of 28 days for this project to be put to the community. For comparison's sake, council allowed a consultation period for 12 months for the food truck trial, but only 28 days to decide upon Sydney's highest building. Because of the limited time frame for working families, only 0.3% of Ryde's population were able to send through a submission. And now, as I'm sure all Ryde councillors are aware through the letter they received by Meriton themselves, the developers are using this very same argument against our community to further their position by stating that since only 0.3% made a position, there isn't significant concern for this development in the community. And now we all know this couldn't be further from the truth, as the only reason for this terribly poor number is a ridiculously short time period for consultation that was allotted. But it's not only this. The DA was put in last year right before Christmas when everyone was preoccupied with other engagements. Now, it may be common practice for developers to rush through due process, developers who do not live in the community and who were not elected by the community, but you would not expect this behaviour from our councillors that were elected by us. So it begs the question, Are the people sitting in front of us right now running council or the developers? And just when you thought there couldn't be any less transparency, during the questions on notice last meeting, council staff admitted that they had had 9 meetings with Meriton, and yet none of us are aware of what happened in these meetings, and the Mayor has made no attempt to shed any light on them. Now, not only is this a disgrace that he created deals in public, but our Mayor is holding meetings that the community isn't even aware of. Furthermore, council staff recently put out a 38-page report full of industry-specific jargon that I certainly couldn't understand. Did you mean to confound the community and confuse the layperson, Mr. Mayor? If not, council is clearly out of touch with the average hard-working Ryde resident who will not have the time nor the understanding to fully comprehend this report. So I stand here on behalf of this community, and while it's a relief that you finally buckled under community pressure, it is too little too late. You are keeping our community in the dark, and it's time you stopped blaming everyone else just to make a political point. And take responsibility for what you have done. If you can't accept your role in this planning proposal, how will anything change in the future? So I urge all councillors here tonight, when making their vote, to not listen to the council staff report, but rather listen to their community and vote against 42 stories or 63 stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Alawat. Mr Keenan Smith, speaking on this, items 1, 2 and 3.
So, tonight we are presented with a very clear question. Do we want to continue the low density to maybe a little bit of medium density residential lifestyle that we have here in Ryde? Or do we want to follow the model of Rhodes and Chatswood with endless high-rise buildings that completely disrupt and destroy the community? I should also note that Rhodes, before it became an actual area, was an industrial wasteland ridden with Agent Orange in the soil. Anyway, that doesn't happen here. So, look, the point is, do we want this to occur here? So one of the important things we've got to keep in mind is it's abundantly clear what the intention of the developers is. Make no mistake, just because they've said that they've made a very generous concession to reduce the height from 63 to 44 stories, that does not necessarily mean that firstly it's going to not disrupt the area, of course it will, but also I think it does something more in indicating the intention of these developers. It's not to, placate us, but it's clear. The intention of these developers is to build an unprecedented structure in the area. That's clear. I mean, 43 stories, if you can point to another 43-storey structure in Ryde, I'd be very, very impressed. The raison d'etre of their construction is large, wholesale overdevelopment. Now, anecdotally, and I think tonight is a testament to it, the community anger against this is white hot. Everyone here that has come up, not representing an organisation, not representing a vested interest, every single person here that is just a rank and file community member has come up against it. And I find it very interesting, there's an individual here, Labor guy, Bennelong, him and I were at loggerheads during the Bennelong by-election. And across the political spectrum, we have found unity against this. So I think what's clear is there is genuine community support against this, and it is about preserving the integrity of our area. It is about preserving our lifestyle, and so we must not support overdevelopment. We must not give in to coke in the bubbler schemes that these developers might suggest, and most importantly of all, we must support the integrity, the lifestyle, and the very fabric of our shared community. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Smith. Matthew Lennox, speaking on item 1.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors. As you're probably aware, my name's Matthew Lennox. I'm Executive Manager, Planning and Government, Meriton Group. And we're speaking in support of the council recommendations on all items tonight. Initially, Mr Triggerboff would like to send his apologies for not being able to attend, but has asked me to advise you of the following. Meriton was founded in this city where Harry forged the Meriton Group from Meriton Street, Gladesville in 1963, and he has developed in Ryde ever since. Despite the thousands of homes and tens of thousands of jobs created by Meriton projects in Ryde, this is the first time the planning process has given him the genuine ability to make one of Meriton's largest ever public benefit contributions to the City of Ryde and its community, where it all began. He looks forward to this proposal proceeding as per the council recommendations, and he asks that councillors have an open mind and consider the facts in making their decision this evening. But what a dilemma we find ourselves in. This proposal is completely consistent with government and council policy, delivers better outcomes in every aspect, and is appropriately located at the gateway of Australia's 4th largest economic centre. But it is being undermined by personal political agendas and misinformation that's actively working against this specific project and the policies of the government those people represent. But we all know that, so let's put the politics aside. Instead, let's focus on the facts and the merits of the proposal, which should form the basis of Council's decision this evening, as this will also form the basis of the future considerations by the Department of Planning as a delegate for the Planning Minister when making the final decision on this matter. The facts of the proposal are: it is consistent with government policy to deliver increased high quality and affordable housing close to transport, jobs, education, health and retail services. This has been verified by the department on behalf of the GSC, and these policies haven't changed since. It has support from all key government agencies including RMS, Transport for New South Wales, RFS, and CASA has approved the original height. It is located away from and does not materially impact local suburban areas. It delivers far superior planning and design outcomes than the existing planning controls, as shown on page 10, with the further support of a design competition. It is consistent with the scale and height of other similar centres which have recently been approved by government. It has been adjusted with a 30% concession on height to 42 storeys to be more in line with the existing environment. It is only slightly taller and slightly more dense than the approved Macquarie Centre. It will not generate any more traffic than the high-density residential development already permitted. That is why both the state roads and transport agencies have endorsed this proposal. Despite the concessions, Meriton has maintained the $40+ million VPA offer with council that was negotiated and facilitated through normal processes, and the outcome has been independently reviewed to be consistent with council policies. This is an effective betterment tax on the developer when we gain a benefit from a process like this. It will also deliver an additional $12.5 million in direct contributions to the state government towards state infrastructure. We have a signed VPA sitting with the state government, and they've decided not to put it on exhibition. It will deliver a further $26 million in Section 94 contributions to provide a total of $78 million in VPAs and contributions. Under the existing controls, there will be poor planning and design outcomes, no VPAs, no affordable housing, and approximately $18 million in Section 94 only. It has responded to the genuine community concerns raised in terms of height, traffic and processes. Despite the months of online campaigning against this project, there were only 380 objections, which is only 0.3% of the Ryde's 125,000 population. This is dwarfed by the 8,500 people in Ryde who rely on the construction industry for employment, the thousands of soccer players that will benefit from the upgrade to the Christie Park, and the hundreds of essential workers, teachers, nurses, police, and their families that would benefit from the affordable housing that would be dedicated by this project. It has also benefited from support from the local community, local business chambers, major industry groups, local sporting clubs, and not-for-profit community housing, community support providers, representing a much larger proportion of the broader community than the individual objections. It has followed process. We will say this to the community and the councillors. Meriton has conducted itself and this process in accordance with the prevailing legislation, policies and guidance from relevant authorities. Accordingly, it is clear that this proposal delivers better outcomes than the current controls in all aspects of the development. And based on the council report, there is no reason why this proposal should not receive support based on a rational and unpolitical assessment from this council or the future state planning processes it will go through. In closing, I echo Harry's sentiments and ask that you make a rational decision this evening and allow this proposal to be sent to the state government, recommending that the plan be made to ensure that we can all benefit from a more appropriate development of this gateway site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lennox. Councillor Purcell.
I initially wish to move a procedural motion that items 1, 2 and 3 are considered concurrently.
Could I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Maggio. Please vote, councillors.
All at the same time.
Thank you, councillors. I'd like to move a recommendation as signalled publicly not to support the finalisation of the planning proposal. I've prepared something earlier and it's on the screen. It should be on the screen. I'm happy to address each item before speaking and allowing debate on the matter. Can I have a seconder? Councillor, no? Councillor Kim, thank you. So Part A reads that Council does not support the finalisation of the planning proposal, including amendments to the local environment plan. Part B, that we write to the Minister for Planning recommended the proposal does not proceed, seeking refusal, and that the refusal of the planning proposal by the 31st of December 2018 for the following reasons. It does not meet community expectations, unmet infrastructure requirements, the increase in height and density is not in the community interest, and the proposal is not required for the City of Ryde to meet its housing targets set by the Greater Sydney Commission. Part C, that Council notify the applicant and those who made a submission of Council's decision. Part D, that Council note the State Government has already imposed capacity for 15,000 extra dwellings in Macquarie University and North Ryde priority precincts, and we reaffirm Council's demands for the State Government to abolish priority precincts in Ryde. Part E, that Council notes that the site is in close vicinity to the Macquarie Park investigation area, which is yet to exhibit any infrastructure planning to support the corridor, and that Council reaffirms its position to the State Government not to rezone any land in the Macquarie Park investigation area to allow for residential. Pardon me. Part F, that City of Ryde reaffirms its demand to be exempt permanently from the Medium Density Housing Code. Part G, that noting deliberate and misleading political commentary surrounding this application, that Council effectively communicate to residents this decision of Council and its stance on overdevelopment, in particular against State Government priority precincts and the Medium Density Housing Code. Part H, that Council reaffirm its commitment to Stage 2 and 3 of Christie Park, and that the General Manager allocates funds for Stage 2 during the current budget process, funded from existing development contributions. Part I, that Council reject the voluntary planning agreement, and Part J, that the executive summary prepared by the Director, City Planning Environment, that's just item 1, that report be noted. Councillors, I expect a lot of debate tonight, so I'll be brief. I'm moving this recommendation as this is a position I've held consistently since my time here on Council. Since being elected in 2012, I've led campaigns against the Herring Road Urban Activation Precinct. And I know Ms Worsley mentioned something before. Why can't we have 8 stories on this side of 112 Talavera Road? We can't have 8 stories there because the State Government rezoned it to allow for 27 stories. In 2014, this Council unanimously passed a submission against the Urban Activation Precinct. So how can we approve 42 stories today when we did not approve 27 stories way back in 2014? There's been a lot of commentary, and I'm prepared to call it out as absolute lies over the last 3 to 6 months on this. They've said that council supported this proposal. They've said that it's been signed off. Victor Dominello has led an absolute smear campaign against this council and its councillors, and shame on him for doing so. We've had reports of Liberal Party volunteers saying that it was this council's idea for the proposal. And these lies, councillors and ladies and gentlemen, are why people hate politics. It's why they've had lost faith in the political process. And what they hate even more than that is someone that says something locally and does something completely different in Parliament.
Is that you?
And that's what we've got here with Mr Dominello. He says he's against overdevelopment, but it was his government that forced priority precincts on Ryde. It was his government that set... it was his government... Point of order? Councillor Lane, I'll be hearing you in silence, so I request the same.
You cut him off last month.
It was this government who set a 7,600 dwelling housing target. It was this government who wants to impose the medium density housing code in Ryde. Saying one thing locally, doing something completely different in Parliament. And I will always call that out. So there's the motion. I think we'll be in furious agreement, councillors. So let's kick it off. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure that we will be in furious agreement. At this stage, I haven't seen the motion. You've scrolled through it so quickly, I fundamentally don't know what's there. So I'd like to start with a question. I'd like to know what time you typed this. I'd like to know why I didn't get a message. Why is it not on Board Vantage, please?
I typed it about 4 p.m. this afternoon.
Sure. So as a matter of courtesy, surely we could be well informed about the #1 red hot issue in Ryde, and you've had 5 hours plus to send it to all councillors, but instead you'll pull a stunt on us at the last minute. Is that right?
You feel free to move a different recommendation, Councillor Brown.
I can't even read this. This is the problem. I mean, this is a governance issue. How can you even understand and comprehend what we're debating when this is the first I've seen of it, and now I can't have it, you've got A to about G or F or whatever the motions are. I can't read, interpret, understand, give that full consideration on what has been out in the public domain for 12 months. Admittedly, only the public had 28 days, I appreciate, but for 12 long months, actually 13 months, we've had this debate, and now you're pulling a stunt at 9:30 at night. You've given us 2 minutes notice. There's no point scrolling through. I can't read all of that and think about it and speak at the same time. So where's the notice, please? I'd like to see it in Board Vantage. It's a question. I'm not speaking to the matter.
I've moved it from the floor, Councillor Brown, as permitted in the Code of Meeting Practice.
So the Code of Meeting Practice allows last-minute stunts for the #1 red-hot issue in Ryde, does it?
It's a recommendation,
Councillor Brown. You think this is respectful of your colleagues. It's extraordinary.
It's a recommendation, Councillor Brown.
Extraordinary. Well, sure. Can I have
take your time to read it? Absolutely. I've got a copy here, which I just read from. You can have a copy.
Can I have a photocopy for all councillors?
Yeah, sure.
How do we make a full consideration of this if we can't even see the words?
We have a copy around.
It's ridiculous to think we're going to debate this when we can't see it.
Assuming you'll move an amendment, Councillor Brown, I haven't seen your amendment, so can I have a copy of that as well?
I haven't seen. I've turned up, having prepared, having had a week's notice. There's about, I don't know how many hundreds of pages here in these documents. That's the documents, the 2 documents I've read, running to many hundreds of pages. I've got my thoughts and considerations and deliberation on those and the 3 items before the public. Not even the public know what you're about to do. They've had consultation, they've made submissions, and here we've got something, we can only see items A and B. This is procedurally unfair. You should not be moving this. I'd like to move a procedural motion that we defer this until we've got consideration for it. This is ridiculous that you'd lump this on it at the last minute. I mean, it's bad enough that we're starting at 9 o'clock at night, which is another silly stunt from you. Labor Party and stunts go hand in glove, don't they? I can't read this. How can I debate it if I cannot even know the content of the motion? It's a perfectly reasonable question.
It's on the screen there, Councillor Brown,
No,
and you're about to get a copy.
It's item A and B only. I also have questions to Ms Code. Can you remind me, please, the consideration of the original planning proposal that was supported by Labor and the Greenies was subsequently submitted to the Department of Planning. How many months did they have consideration of that for, please?
Ms. Code.
roughly, just, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the planning sorry, can you just ask that question again, Councillor Brown?
For how long? So Labor and the Greens approved something in November 2017. It was then subsequently submitted. There were negotiations. There was a submission made to Department of Planning or Greater Sydney Commission.
The application was moved by the council to go to Gateway. The Gateway was approved by the Department of Planning and Environment as a delegate for the Greater Sydney Commission. So the Greater Sydney Commission in effect said at the Gateway stage this proposal, which was then for 63 stories, had strategic merit. Part of that Gateway determination, there were 7 or 8 criteria that the developer Meriton had to go away and consult with state agencies, including CASA, RMS, Transport for New South Wales, and a number of others. That was a 7-month process, which was why there was a delay between the Gateway approval and the exhibition period.
Fine, thank you. So there were 7.5 months, all of which I'm sure was very legitimate. I've got no issues with that. What I do have issue is what I've seen already, and Councillor Laxale, you've given the Department of Planning 2.5 weeks to meet your numerous conditions here. It just seems extraordinary that you throw this on the Department of Planning. They've just taken 7 months to consider something else. Now you've given them 2.5 weeks. It just is breathtaking, quite frankly. I don't understand how any of the councillors here can do our jobs as governance professionals of this place when this is the sort of property we have. It's just breathtaking. Of itself, for this sort of stunts, you ought to be censured, really.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
And can I say, I've asked some questions. I reserve my right to speak on the matter after I've fully considered the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
I rise in support of this as a refusal. To all of those genuinely concerned residents of Ryde that are here tonight, you can be rest assured that I share your love of Ryde. My family, my friends live here too. I also share your despair. I too am stuck in traffic every morning, in the shadows of those massive priority precincts, trying to drive my kids to their very full school and to get to where I need to go and get there on time. It makes me angry that our state MP, Mr. Dominello, has only just seemingly woken up to the lack of infrastructure and massive overdevelopment we have had to endure as residents here in his electorate. And we are right to feel angry. You are also right to feel angry about the mudslinging. There is no one angrier than we councillors who are not responsible for this overdevelopment, but we're being blamed for it by a minister of the government that actually is responsible for it. A minister that could have stopped those massive priority precincts, a minister that could have made sure we had adequate infrastructure and stopped the height rezoning in Macquarie Park. He knows that his government has already zoned the site in question for 900 units. Let's be clear here. Mr. Dominello's government has already zoned 112 Talavera Road for 900 units. Against the wishes of the community, only 30% of the submissions supported the rezoning, and council recommended against it in 2014. Mr. Dominello has had 10 years to consider the mess that his government have made of Ryde, and now, only months before an election, desperate, faced with losing his seat to a mayor who actually works for the community. And so, yes, you can laugh. The Liberal Party are all here tonight. And what does Mr. Dominello do? He points the finger at councillors, at new councillors who also work hard for this community, except for those councillors, those ones that go to social media. I'm not going to bag you with your silly T-shirt on. Please go to social media and our council website and look at the great work that the mayor and other councillors have been doing in the community. We're out there working while the minister and his Liberal Party staffers throw mud to undermine us. Just scroll through our meeting agendas. Have a look at the things most of us have brought to council in the last year that benefit our community. I work incredibly hard for our community. I represent our LGA as a chair on community governance groups. I jump at any opportunity to learn more. I'm currently completing an elected member's executive certificate through UTS and Local Government New South Wales. I take this role very seriously. I cannot say the same for some of the Liberal councillors who are letterboxing lies and dressing up in cardboard boxes.
It's my best post.
I mean, all to increase the election chances of a desperate colleague. They have no respect for the role of council. The process won't end tonight, but people will realise that the only ones in Ryde that have power to stop another tall residential building are Minister Dominello, Minister Anthony Roberts and their government, just as they had power to stop the other massive residential buildings. Council doesn't have the power to approve developments of this size, regardless of what Mr Dominello has said to the media. He and his minions know that. Mr Dominello suddenly wants to stop overdevelopment now. So why didn't he want to stop overdevelopment before now? Like, before we were overdeveloped? Let's take Ivanhoe. Yes, they might have replaced 700 social housing units with 950, which is great. But they also added 2,000 private dwellings, 2,000 units that Mr Dominello was spruiking up on television only back in April. Lachlan's Line. Let's never forget this government approved 15,000 units in North Ryde and Herring Road against the will of council and against the will of the community. Why didn't he beg for them to stop then? Where were his Liberal councillors spinning fibs on social media and his bossy young Liberals? Data mining at the local shopping precincts? Where were they back then? Extension of time, please, Mr Mayor. Thank you. You know why he wasn't making any noise? Because there wasn't an election around the corner. He didn't need voters' email addresses to perpetuate more misleading rubbish. So the Premier and the Greater Sydney Commission do what Mr Dominello has asked, and they make this go away until after the election. Put this on hold until after the election. While the state government go and investigate the state government, have we forgotten the telling line from their planning minister, Anthony Roberts? At a planning discussion in September, he told the forum, he said, overdevelopment doesn't exist. Well, I'm sorry, Mr Roberts and Mr Dominello, it does, and you can't blame us for that.
Thank you, Councillor Pedersen. Councillor Maggio.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks very much for giving me this opportunity. I haven't attended the last two meetings and I'm glad I haven't, and I'm glad I'm not in a political party. It's an absolute disgrace what's happening. But let me put it in a perspective, independent way. Good evening, members of the community, for this extraordinary meeting to consider Meriton's planning proposal for 112 Tavalia Road, Macquarie Park. And can I firstly say I do apologise that we've dragged you here at such a late time and such short notice. That was a captain's call, and you can read into it, but what you like, but it's absolutely nothing for our public perception and an open and transparent council. It seems tonight that some of our political elves are stuck preparing their good and bad list for Santa, or doing their Christmas cards, or maybe cleaning their chimneys, where I can assure you there's lots of dirt. In all good conscience, I had to be here tonight because apart from our good staff, we need a council at this meeting to represent the truth and the facts, and that's what I'll be representing this evening. I want to provide some clarity around the development, which, shock horror, might not be as bad as it's been made out to be, for those who definitely have a barrow to push. The proposal before us will be considered by a bunch of councillors who, sorry to say, tend to put their interests of their parties before their duty to their serving their constituents. With that in mind, there are three important things you need to know this evening. Three important matters. There's a state election in a few months, and every council in this room, except me, is in some way linked to their Liberal incumbent member for Ryde, or the person who wants his job, Labor's candidate for Mayor of Ryde. For clarity, the group of decision makers before you tonight comprises of one independent, myself, a minority block of Liberal councillors, A majority block made up of 4 Labor and 2 Green councillors and a Labor aligned independent councillor. Your point of order?
What's the point of order, Councillor Kim? Relevance?
There is relevant.
I'm
The
happy to
point- you're
allow.
gonna gag me this
I'm
evening?
happy. No, I'm not gagging you, Councillor
Well,
Maggio.
this
You know
councillor-
my record
well,
on
we have,
relevance,
we
points
have
of
one
order.
who's,
So continue.
going to gag us. Right on my
Carry
left,
on, Councillor
'cause
Maggio.
he has a certain...
Carry on, Councillor
Thank you
Maggio.
very much. We won't get into that, but we'll later on. For clarity, the group of decision makers before you tonight comprises of and so forth. And because of that, I've just explained, you're about to witness the Mayor of this council pretend to be acting in some way in the community's interest when really his primary focus is himself. He couldn't give 2 hoots about any... Here we go again.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
There you go. I've got
Councillor
all
Kim.
night. It's all right, I've got all night.
Actually, I call an act of disorder. It's trying to portray Mayor to be imputing to be improper person.
No, I'm not.
Councillor Kim, I thank you for your concern. I'm
Don't worry, there's both
I'm
sides.
quite thick-skinned, and I'm happy to wear a bit of political argy-bargy. I will draw the line at defamation, though.
There's no defamation. There's no
so
defamation.
if you're willing to defame me, Councillor Maggio, I'll ask you to
There's no
reconsider.
defamation, Mr. Mayor.
However,
It's facts,
please,
it's facts.
please continue. And Councillor Kim,
I'm
I'll
quite
pull him
happy
up
to
if I
start
think he's
again.
gone
I'm
too
quite happy
far.
to start again because
But I thank you for your
I know
concern.
the tactics. So, you should just let me finish my
I agree.
deliberations.
Carry on,
and then I'm
Councillor
going to move
Maggio.
an amendment.
Carry on,
Thank you.
Councillor Maggio.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. He couldn't give 2 hoots about anything about your concerns or the... Oh, sorry. He couldn't give 2 hoots about any of your concerns on development. All he knows is that the whole issue has been dumbed by so much of misrepresented so much that it's easier and less risky to make the wrong decision. And thanks to the major parties, we have 2 low-calibre candidates hoping to be elected as the member for Ryde who secretly think so lowly of the members of this community they've allowed this process to become a political football. And with that, we might as well go home because the aim of the game... There we go again.
Councillor Gordon.
I haven't announced. You're wrong again. I have not announced anything.
What's the point? You can't have a debating point as a
I
point
have-
of order.
It's considering. Considering.
That's not a point of order, Councillor Gordon.
Thank
If we could please, I think this is slowing up the process here, councillors. As I've said,
If
I'm
they
pretty.
do, just let me listen
Councillor
to my-
Maggio, I'm pretty lenient on debate.
I know you are.
I draw the line
I
at
know you
defamation, and if Councillor Maggio wants to raise some
my views and
spicy
opinions.
debating points,
My
I'm
views
more
and
than happy
opinions.
for him to do so, as I'm sure
They're
other
not very
councillors
happy with
will.
them, and
So
that's the way it goes.
I'm very happy
can
with
leave
your
the
debating
room.
points.
They can leave the room or get some earplugs.
After
Why don't
you,
you just
Coun-
listen and
after
give the
you,
common
Councillor
courtesy
Maggio.
like I have and have allowed you to all speak. But when I come to speak, you always got to ram in. Let me speak, all right? Let me speak like I've allowed all of you to speak, all right? You might learn something. And thanks to the major parties, we have 2 low-calibre candidates hoping to be elected as member for Ryde who secretly think so lowly of the members of this community they are allowed this process to become a political football. And with that, we might as well go home because the aim of the game in political football is to pretend you're on everyone's side and score as many votes as you can. If both the major parties were taken out of the equation, you would hesitate to call this like it is a shocking conflict of interest. A real shocking conflict of interest. Well, I'll tell you this. With both parties in the equation, we still have a shocking conflict of interest, which I intend to come back to very shortly. The important fact you need to know this evening is that the Meriton planning proposal comes with strong endorsement and a recommendation approved by a highly skilled planning team led by a very capable list code. It also has a tick of approval from every single relevant and affected government agency that has so far met the criteria of our ultimate planning authority, the Greater Sydney Commission, and its delegate, the New South Wales Department of Planning. And it aligns with a raft of other plans that basically confirm that Macquarie Park is a big deal. It's a significant, strategically important and rapid developing employment, commercial and innovation precinct. And I know I can be certain of this. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the member of Ryde has spent much of his time as an elected representative talking about it. He has a habit of reminding us at every opportunity. But for some reason, suddenly, Macquarie Park apparently isn't good enough. Doesn't have the infrastructure or the capacity to be the location for the kind of development Meriton's planning proposal. What an absolute dishonest load of rubbish. The last thing you need to know is that tonight's outcome won't make a speck of difference to this project going ahead. It will happen. It will go ahead because there's a consensus from all the bodies and experts that matter, that Meriton's proposal is good to go. And let me just cut to the chase. What that means is that regardless of what we decide tonight, this residential development will happen. And when it does happen, the $35 million that was on the table will be gone, and the ratepayers of Ryde will be the poorer for it. Because our mayor thinks we're flushing that much money down the gurgler to stay in the game of state election. And at this point, I would like to quote some inspirational words by someone we all know. Every day, people across New South Wales go to work to build a better life. As Perry, my job is to support you to get ahead. Blah, 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 blah. Build in the future and get out of the way so you can spend time on things that matter. Today, New South Wales is a place of opportunity. There's more to do, and we've got to do the job. So let's get the job done, New South Wales. Getting out of the way, says Gladys. Excuse me, my mouth's dry. Spending time on things that matter. I would have preferred not spending my time on this matter tonight, but in contrast to your claims, in your advertisement, you and your member for Ryde have gotten in the way. Points, disrespect and disregard for Ryde's community. You may be stunned to be hearing that my view on this issue doesn't seem to fit my general attitude to what's become and it's happening between the development in Ryde, especially over the last few years. Everyone knows where I stand on overdevelopment and inappropriate development in low-density residential suburbs within our city. It disgusts me that we really should have made a better effort to get it under control, but it's too late now, and probably the worst victims that are suffering ratepayers are in Meadowbank. But that doesn't mean we should kick an hole and go with one-size-fits-all approach, because different parts of Ryde are suited to different kinds of development. More importantly, I won't sympathise issues just because it's convenient or because it's some way of benefit to my personal political interests. I would rather provide the community with all the facts and allow the ratepayers of Ryde to arrive to their own informed conclusion, not only about this matter, but matters we all decide on. There have been now months of claims, accusations, blatant lies and misleading statements about Meriton's proposal. But most of it is just lies and deception and is disrespectful and offensive to the ratepayers and the broader community. Not only that, it smears exceptional work by a highly skilled, qualified planning staff. It disregards the important role played by numerous independent government agencies in scrutinising this and other development proposals, because they have to be satisfied on merits of those proposals and if it needs to meet certain criteria before signing off. So to the residents, the ratepayers, the fans of the City of Ryde, visitors to our wonderful city, and anyone with a passing interest, and also anyone I've left out, let's not beat around the bush this evening. All this information is happening because there is two so-called leaders in our community that show severe symptoms of a disease called election campaign-itis. There is a few months to go before the state election, so this disease is now epidemic proportions and is highly contagious, especially among political candidates. I would recommend, if you want to catch it, if you don't want to catch it, then block your ears to make sure you don't subject yourself to the Mayor's and the Member of Ryde's non-stop production line of lies. Well, it's the truth and the facts. Some severe symptoms show someone who has been affected with election campaign-itis include much higher than usual use of deception, lies and misleading of constituents by a politician constituents to think in a certain way about an issue where they're not really concerned about, and asking the constituents to then make a submission in a certain way so a politician's stand seems valid. Irrational decision-making, abuse of power and concerted attempts to limit transparency by a politician. Statements made that a politician forgets are at odds with statements they've made in the past. On a serious note though, A mayor may pretend he doesn't, but it's clear to everyone that there's a serious conflict of interest which prevents him from properly carrying out his duties in the interest of the community he serves in his role on this council. Specifically, the mayor can't represent his council and constituents and make decisions in the best interests, especially when it involves significant matters such as this, when he's also busy trying to keep everybody's friend in the lead up to the March election. That's why we're witnessing the extraordinary sight of a mayor holding a meeting at 9 p.m. at short notice while he waves away the community's $35 million contribution from a developer which will ultimately get the go-ahead. We should deal with this matter, we should deal with this, and we should deal with any other conflict of interest, and there are a couple of options here. Mr Mayor, perhaps you need to sit out of this vote along with your fellow Labor councillors, because we all know that despite caucusing and not being allowed, it happens anyway, all the time. Which means the Mayor's Labor and Labor-aligned colleagues are all a part of this conflict interest and should sit out also. But wait, there's still more conflicts to deal with. On the Liberal side, it's hard to deny the councils linked with the member of Ryde in the same political party would not be making decisions like this one without considering its effect on the member of Ryde's electoral fortunes.
Councillor Kim.
He's bringing the council in disrepute. I'd really like him to apologise and retract his statement, please.
Councillor Kim, look, I take what Councillor Maggio says with a grain of salt. I'm happy for him to continue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We're both
carry on, Councillor Maggio.
We're both in the same thick skin.
Yep.
Thank you. So, given that it leaves us without a quorum, we should seriously consider Plan B. That is, that we agree to completely take this matter out of our hands and debate the decision elsewhere to an independent arbitrator. Confidential sessions and VPAs. Early this year, I took part in a confidential council session where a voluntary planning agreement was negotiated with Meriton to capture some value from its Macquarie Park development. Amal was very happy and enthusiastic participant through the negotiations, even making a surprise demand that the Meriton lifts affordable housing contribution from 5% to 7%. Meriton agreed. It's fair to say our mayor was also thrilled that one of the community benefits negotiated with Meriton included an $8 million plus upgrade for our outstanding football facility at Christie Park. What we did that evening is something we've done numerous times. It's a standard way that councils across New South Wales negotiate their VPAs with developers. It's not ideal. In fact, I would prefer every deliberation, every decision, every debate to be open in an open session with ratepayers able to see what's going on, because we can never have too much transparency. Then I saw the member of Ryde on television news using dramatised expressions as though he was auditioning for some kind of Hitchcock thriller, saying there's a certain kind of stench and describing the VPA negotiation session as a secret meeting after midnight. The hypocrisy was incredible. It was definitely incredible. VPAs came into around 2005, but most of them were in existence, and then been in operation under a Liberal New South Wales government. I can't recall any Liberal government in New South Wales ever calling for them to be abolished. Oh, hang on. The member of Ryde could be raising this as a major issue of concern, but hasn't done so. We've reached an agreement with Meriton in the proper accepted process, and if you take a look at Miss Code's report, there have been external experts engaged to assist planning staff in these negotiations, and that underline that everything was above board, beyond reproach, and carried out professionally and with serious diligence. And about the same time, the scare campaign began, and it's coming from the office of the member of Ryde and his elves. I'm an advocate for arming our ratepayers with facts, and what happened here was they were being grossly misled. In fact, the member of Ryde and his team of elves even got a bit desperate, trying to talk up the hysteria and wanted an extension to the exhibition period. I had no issues with that. In fact, it may have provided an opportunity and enough time to clarify some of the false statements made by both the Mayor and the member of Ryde. And can you see clearly, Everything has been rushed through to meet the Mayor's election timetable. But ladies and gentlemen, I can reveal here tonight and now why they couldn't get worked up in opposing this proposal. I'll tell you why. I visited the 112 Talavera Road site yesterday, and I can tell you it's probably the best available location you can get to build high-rise residential in this local government area. And that's coming from me, someone who you know is outspoken on overdevelopment and the wrong types of high density in low density areas across Ryde. I'm not talking overdevelopment that's lazily applied to anything that contains more than a few dwellings. I'm simply referring to buildings that don't fit with the character of the area they're being built in. That means the location is an important part of the equation here, because in a place like Macquarie Park that's serviced by underutilised multi-billion-dollar rail infrastructure and is identified commercially as a precinct with potential growth, there's a scope of certain type of development that needs to be implemented in Macquarie Park. Especially, there's a particular proposal, especially this particular proposal, because it's located far away enough from the low density areas that have so far borne the brunt of inappropriate development in this city. And in fact, this development is right on the edge of a freeway, right next to the shopping centre, next to the trains, next to the bus interchange, near the private hospital where medical staff are trained, and close to Macquarie University, of course, close to the business parks and our fantastic football facility at Christie Park. And with no low-density housing surrounding the site, it's zoned as high-density residential. As I've already said, it has ticked all the boxes from all the relevant agencies on its planning merits alone. The important thing is putting the right type of quality of development in the right place that always is making sure the community's needs are met. Now, everybody knows we're about to make an irrational decision this evening, the wrong decision to review planning and approval of this development, which we approved elsewhere at a state planning level. And when I say state planning level, I mean a state government which the member of Ryde is a minister and is under its planning policy. And that's because, at the risk of repeating this fact yet again, we know already that all the agencies that have been asked to assess these kinds of developments have given it the green light. Of course, we have an election in March next year, and as we get closer, we can see there are some politicians who become increasingly cuckoo. And they start making strange decisions, usually that will score them a few extra votes. And with development, it's clear the member of Ryde and our esteemed mayor are showing these signs of cuckoo and not being honest with you with the ratepayers of Ryde. As things stand, both you, the mayor and the member of Ryde, are snubbing the community and pretending that you are somehow protecting them against overdevelopment when you both of you know it's a lie and this development is going ahead whether you like it or not. The only decision you are going to make this evening is, do we accept the $35 million on behalf of our ratepayers, or do we squander it because the mayor and the member of Ryde and all their elves want to play election games? Let's all play political football with the community's money. What's absolutely remarkable about this is that the member of Ryde, I can recall, has made dozens of media announcements at Macquarie Park, taken up as a revolutionary commercial centre, a corporate wonderland, a technology hub and a precinct that we need to continue developing as quickly as possible. In 2015, he stood in front of the TV cameras with Brad Hazzard, who was briefly the planning minister, to announce that Ivanhoe Estate was one of the most exciting property developments in the area. We could have that apparently, but we can't have the quite reasonable proposal right location by Meriton. And what has the member of Ryde done about this shambolic state of Meadowbank? Do we all vote? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Let's go over now to his sparring partner, our mayor, set in a VPA negotiation for another developer, not one as financially stable as Meriton, and indeed one that hasn't yet come through with the goods. This developer also had a high-rise residential project on the same road. Actually, not exactly the same. Meriton is developing on a site already zoned residential. The other developer was rezoning employment land before building its high-rise tower. We respect our mayor was consistent and would have knocked back that other proposal right. No, he backed it. He voted to approve it, and so did his fellow Labor councillors. I wonder what could have influenced him to stray from that path. Surely not the election. Oh yes, the election. And is a acute case of election campaign-itis. That example should surely be enough to support my call for you, Mr Mayor, to see out of this vote in the public interest, in the interest of the ratepayers and the interest of the planning decisions being made on merit. If we weren't headed to the ballot box in a few months, you would have without no doubt supported this, especially because the one that led the negotiations and came up with it in the first place. And you would have also wanted it to support it because the funding it provided to upgrade Christie Park, the headquarters of football, the sport we thought that you loved and is your favourite sport. Your actions here, Mr Mayor, I can tell you, are creating quite few concerns amongst the football family at Christie Park. They're worried the 18,000 players in the area in Australia's fastest growing sport will now miss out, all because you and the member of Ryde have put your self-interest before the interest of the constituents. Finally, back to the VPA negotiations. Originally the plan was for 60-odd stories, and now you may be aware it has been reduced to 3 42-storey towers. And as I said, our Mayor wasn't simply sitting on the sideline. In fact, he ambushed the Meriton representatives with a request for extra affordable housing, and they said yes. When he suddenly acquired the unofficial naming rights to the building and got cold feet. There's several quotes here by Gladys, and you know, and I won't bore you with them because I know I want to allow other speakers. I will allow other speakers. I will. But what I would like to do, Mr Mayor, and it's my prerogative this evening to move an amendment based on what's happened over the last few months and based on you know, fairness to our applicant and fairness to the community. This has been merely political interference and political tampering with the process. So I'd really like to move an amendment, and I'd really like a seconder. And if I don't get a second, I can assure you now I will be abstaining on vote on the principles that I've spoken tonight. There's been terribly political interference on this development, and so I'd like to move an amendment, given that the events of today, in which we have learned that the Premier has announced a review of Macquarie Park planning by the Greater Sydney Commission, with the findings handed down in May after the March election, that these details have emerged on the day we are considering a planning proposal involving an applicant that has featured in subjected and non-factual anti-development commentary by her cabinet colleague, the member of Ryde, and that our Mayor has also felt the need to change his view on the basis of the above mentioned, the campaign, the election in March. I believe that this process has been compromised, and we must urgently act to afford the applicant and the planning proposal being considered tonight some procedural fairness, and that is what I stand for. There's been no procedural fairness. So I move this evening an amendment that Council refer the 112 Teveleer Road, Macquarie Park proposal this amendment this evening, based on procedural fairness, that I move that Council refer the 1112 Teveleer Road, Macquarie Park proposal to the Greater Sydney Commission for comment, requesting a response to Council within 14 days, and that upon receipt of this response, the matter then be referred to the Independent Planning Commission for determination. And we remove all politics from this matter, because that's all that has been happening for the last few months. I normally don't get this passionate. I said my piece, but I think both sides of the spectrum, political spectrum, need to sincerely wake up a little bit.
Councillor Maggio, thank you. We don't have the, you might need to tweak this a little bit. First of all, is there a seconder before we spend time tweaking this? Okay, thank you, Councillor Lee. So we don't have the power to refer it to the Independent Planning Commission, so that you may want to change that to upon receipt of this response that council request. Might ask Ms. Code for some.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Maggio, we would need some clarity about what exactly the response you want from the Greater Sydney Commission is. The Greater Sydney Commission or the Minister can call this proposal in from council at any time. We do not have the power, as the Mayor has said, to refer it to the Independent Planning Commission. What we could do is we could refer it to the Greater Sydney Planning Commission with no recommendation, as you have no recommendation there, and we could request that the Commission consider referring it to the Independent Planning Commission for a review. But we don't have the power to do it, we can only ask for that to be done.
Upon reading the, would you like me to respond?
I suppose we just need to get the amendment clear. Yeah, Councillor Maggio.
Just on response to that, Ms. Code, I think we do have the initial power. I mean, because it's a significant development, and the Independent Planning Commission is an independent review panel based on determination, because there is some considerable comments that I've raised here in relation to procedural fairness.
I don't think we do have the power, Councillor Maggio, but I'll ask Mr. Kapidis.
I've got it in front of me, so you can read it if you like.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding, Councillor Maggio, is that we only have the power to either recommend that the planning proposal be made or not to be made. The Minister ultimately decides where, or the Greater Sydney Commission actually decides, or the Minister decides what happens with the planning proposal after we write to them, or write to the Minister saying whether or not the planning proposal should be made. The Minister will then, depending on how the Minister feels, may refer it to another planning authority for determination. But I stand by what Ms. Code said. We don't have the power to refer it off ourselves.
Councillor Marriott, currently your amendment is unlawful, and I have to rule it out of order unless you can make some amendments to it.
So can you just, Mr. Kapidis, I'm asking for the Greater Commission to make comment on the development, correct? We can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and on receipt of that response, you're suggesting we can't refer this to the Independent Planning Commission for an independent determination.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct, Councillor Maggio.
I find that incorrect.
Oh.
I need to go with legal counsel's advice, Councillor Maggio.
I've proven him wrong before.
Fantastic. Well, I'll have to take his advice, and unless you're willing to change the amendment, I'll have to rule it out of order.
Okay, well, look, I like to compromise. What changes would you like if you support that amendment?
Well, I'd like the amendment to be lawful. Council requests the Greater Sydney Commission. Look, I don't agree with your amendment, by the way, so just for the record. I should be sending our recommendation as soon as possible. Request that the Greater Sydney... Councillor Maggio, it's your amendment. I don't want to put words into your mouth. So if you don't have the words, we'll just have to move on.
So can I ask Ms. Code, pending refusal this evening, it'll go to Sydney Greater Commission?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council can either recommend, we're only making a recommendation, it will be referred to the Greater Sydney Commission. If Council does not make a decision tonight either to say that the plan proceeds, the plan is varied and proceeds, or the plan is refused, it will go to the Greater Sydney Commission. The Greater Sydney Commission or the Mayor, if Council fails to make a decision tonight, can call this in. So
the Minister.
The Greater City Commission or the Minister, sorry, Mr. Mayor, can call this in if Council fails to make a decision tonight.
Okay.
So if you just explain to me what you're trying to do, Councillor.
I'm trying to remove
I
want procedural fairness based on the political assumptions and deceitfulness of both political parties. I think it's not fair that the applicant has to deal with this matter. I think it's about procedural fairness. I think we need to remove the decision making this evening and allow an independent panel to address our issues. It's become a very political football,
Well, I
based
think
on
Councillor Maggio,
vilification of the mayor, based on the accusations
Councillor
of council
Maggio,
officers.
you've made these points.
I think
I
Councillor Maggio,
just want to move on, Councillor
You can
Maggio.
probably just say, Councillor Maggio, that that the application be referred to the Greater Sydney Commission and the Commission be requested to consider referring it to the Independent Planning
Okay.
Commission to make the determination on the matter.
All right, I'm happy with that.
We can't compel them to respond within 14 days.
Councillor Maggio, are you happy with that before I seek a seconder?
Is that okay, Councillor Maggio?
Councillor Lane, are you happy to second that? Or is anyone happy to second it? No. Okay. The amendment lapses. Next speaker, please. Is there any more debate? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to start by foreshadowing a procedural motion that we vote in seriatim on this mayoral minute. I'd like to... the mayoral minute of itself is rather inconsistent, has a whole lot of red herrings, has a whole lot of offensive rubbish in it as well, and many inconsistencies and plain untruths, mistruths, half-truths. Frankly, the BS meter was running overtime when you wrote this one, I'm sure. But there are some elements in it that are worthy of support, and hence the opportunity to vote in seriatim on things that are, you know, possibly good in parts and are absolute rubbish on the other part. Can I start by saying I assume I can have about 15 extensions of time, can I?
If you must. You don't have to, Councillor Brown.
I promise you I won't. But I do think the lower house is a wasted opportunity, and instead for the filibuster, the Legislative Council could be a more appropriate home for you, Councillor Maggio. I thank you for sharing your contribution with us tonight. I want to say at the outset... that's good, I'm glad you've taken that on board. I'd like to say at the outset, councillors, that we are well past the point of having a discussion about overdevelopment. That was the story 5 years ago. We are well and truly beyond that. If the property development sector haven't figured that out yet, if they think 63 or 45 or 35 or 110, whatever you want to call it, I don't care, we are well and truly past that. Absolutely beyond the pale. We've moved, frankly, into a new orbit. You know, we're talking egregious, outrageous, out of scale, out of touch. This is our community. This does not belong to the business world. It is a business park, I will remind you, not a residential park. It's a business park at Macquarie Park. Someone acquires a plot of land and thinks they can just do whatever they damn well like and be damned the views of the community. I am not one of those. And I say to the Labor and Greenie councillors on this place, you've only been here for 12 months, and it blows me away that you are so out of touch with our community in such a short space of time. You absolutely are completely out of touch. This is not about politics. It's not about the 23rd of March. This will go on well and truly well beyond that time frame. If you only think to yourselves that this is some political stitch-up, as this character from Meriton said, referencing, what is it, short-term political gain. My God, dear fellow. I tell you what, this is about long-term community loss. This is our community, not yours. And unless you are speaking against your own proposal, Harry's greatest gift to Ryde is frankly not welcome here. It is absolutely not welcome. If it's 63 or 45 or whatever you want to call it, we don't want it. It's just not good enough. There are 400 odd submissions, and yet there are thousands and thousands of people that have signed a petition. In fact, I was running around with Councillor Lane, Majali and Udelian and many others, and in the only time in my life, and I've been in a political party for more than 30 years, folks, I've never experienced an event where community members will stand in a line to sign a petition. I've never experienced that in my life. This is truly extraordinary. This is well beyond politics. I could have been there from the Madman Calathumpian Party. They just don't care. They don't want this building. They don't want the Laxale Towers where they are. It doesn't matter how many stories you put up there. The community simply doesn't want it. Many of our community have approached me and said they want to start a resident action group specifically dedicated to opposing this development. How can you possibly think this is satisfactory, councillors, when a group of residents want to start an action group absolutely opposed to what you have proposed 12 months ago? How you've sat in silence for nearly a year and done nothing, having sat on your hands for I don't know how long, all the time blaming someone else, pointing the finger here, point there, point there. It's always someone else's fault. There's always a giant political conspiracy, isn't there? But you fail to accept personal responsibility for what you did at 20 minutes to midnight in a secret session in this room. No cameras, no members of the public. Isn't it sad that you now walk away? What a crab walk this is. In fact, you're not even walking sideways, you're going backwards at 100 miles, aren't you? Most unusual for the politicos around this place. When I look at this Meriton proposal, my friends, I don't see the community interest being taken account of. All I assess in the first, second or third proposal, the existing proposals have height limits of, what does it say, 28 stories, 26 and 12. The amended proposal, 60, which is actually 63, by the way, plus 27, plus 30, plus 45. Now, the way I do maths at school, that equals 165 stories in total. Now, I understand we're not going to build to the moon, although the Laxale penthouse on the top story would be quite impressive on floor 165. But when I assess the cumulative impact of remaining stories on all the other buildings of the Laxale Towers, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 42 plus 42 plus 42 plus 27, which they conveniently left out. Whoops, there was an error there. Plus 13. And what does that equal? That equals a total cumulative impact of 166. It's one story more. Your compromise is more. How about that? How extraordinary to think we've listened to the community. Isn't that lovely? No one asked for more, did they? I'll keep listening. Anyone want more? No? No one wants more. Well, that's a terrible shame. You give reference to the neighbours. Isn't this extraordinary? An additional 1,000 units on top of the Macquarie Centre. I can't remember who approved that, Councillor Jerome Laxale-Labor. What about the other one, the 1,400 units down the road on Talavera? Councillor Jerome Laxale-Labor. Who approved that one, I wonder? It's very therapeutic. It's like clearing some parasitic virus if I go -Labor. This absolute rubbish from Meriton ought to be treated with the contempt it deserves. It really should. It is absolute world-class crap. I've spoken in previous months about the lack of community licence, about there being no community licence. Just leave it there, Roy.
Keep Australia beautiful, mate.
Good on you, mate. Well done. Give it to the man from Meriton.
What are you going on about your community and you're fucking littering, you idiot?
Oh, yeah, that's all right,
Fucking
mate.
littering,
You're a
you
good
idiot.
soul. You've got a good heart, Roy.
Wake up,
Well
mate.
done to you.
Change-
Well done to you.
come
I've
in
spoken
the
many
kingdom.
times about the VPA, and I've spoken about the principle of it. I've spoken about the lack of community licence, the lack of social licence. Not once have the developers ever come to us and said, can we do this? Can we bring forward this motion? Sorry? You're damn straight it's not. But it didn't work at Shepherds Bay, it hasn't worked at other centres at Talavera, and now here we are doubling up, tripling up. We just keep going. There comes a point in time, councillors, where you must just say no. We need councillors that push back against the property development sector. They will never get the message unless they have a unified message that is complete and total and carries the weight of 12 people. Ideally not at 11 o'clock at night. Be better to have this meeting at 7 o'clock, wouldn't it? When all of us are here. not when you know that some have taken a notice of leave. We need a unanimous view, councillors. Not a tricky view that's wrapped up in your new motion where you've given us 2 minutes notice, if that. You've got a whole lot of inconsistent rubbish, some of which is completely untrue, I must say, but I can worry about that in my 15th extension of time. I'm not to be outdone by Councillor Maggio, after all. The fundamental problem here, my friends, is simply this. Some politicians have simply lost sight of your local streets. They're more interested in their ambition for Macquarie Street than they are in your local street. Yes. That's why these developments go through. You are secondary. In fact, you're not even that. You are not the first order, you are not the second order. You are possibly the last order of the day, unless we're in election season. And when it comes round again, in about however many, just under 2 years' time, there will be councillors on this council that are no longer validated. Because this is the #1 red-hot issue for our community. This is the litmus test that defines you. For all the carry on about open space, green space, you know, cuddle the koalas and all the greeny stuff you normally carry on with over there, what does it count for if you put the tallest, largest, most significant building structure in Sydney here with bugger all consultation? Even we were poorly informed about it. The community had no chance. 12 months of discussion about food trucks, and I've still never seen one. We have food trucks apparently, but we consulted with you for 12 months. For the Laxale Towers, we consulted with you for 28 days. 28 days. And it is, as many of you have said to me, it is referenced colloquially as the Laxale Towers. It's your intergenerational perpetual lifetime gift, isn't it, Mr Mayor? And so for that, I'm going to move a notice of motion at the next monthly meeting, and I'd like to formally name it after you. It's my gift to you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to offer you that gift and then ask the council to approve the formal naming of the Laxale Towers. I quite like these. I didn't know about them, but well done to each of you. And I'd then like to write to the Geographic Names Board and have it formally recognised. In the same way we can change the Civic Centre to Ryde Central, whatever that means, we can change the Meriton Complex to the Laxale Towers. I'm sure that your community, and it is our ward together in the West Ward, I'm sure you'll be thanked at the ballot box, Mr Mayor. I've no doubt at all. If it be the 23rd of March or it be the council ballot in 2 years' time, I think they'll line up again. They won't be lining up for a petition that Councillor Lane or I will be at the local shops or the railway stations early in the morning. They'll be lining up to vote against you. They'll be lining up to stop the Laxale Towers. They'll remember who put that signature building site, who was behind it unanimously, who voted on it at minutes to midnight, who put it through secret session, who had a unanimous vote of all Labor and all Green councillors. Good luck to him. Good luck to him. Fine, well, he was a new councillor who clearly didn't know what he was doing. Don't interrupt me, I didn't interrupt you, Councillor Pedersen. Thanks all the same. Nice of you to play, but nonetheless, we can have the debate. I respected your right to silence. Thank you all the same. You obviously don't like the fact that you are heavily involved in this and you're up to your eyeballs in it. You've had many opportunities. You've even referenced, we got the best deal we could. Here we go, here's a pearl of this one. When it finally came out and was released by the Northern District Times on the front page conveniently, here we go. Let's have some quotes. Ryde Mayor Jerome Laxale, one of those who voted in favour of the proposal, said the council got the best deal it could get. Let's applaud the Mayor, should we? All of us together, please. Well done, Mr Mayor. Well done. It's a fine effort, the mini Donald Trump that you are. Property developer, come politician, come deal doer, come negotiator. Well done to you. Well done. My friends, there is no social licence for this type of development. I've said it many, many times before. Labor and the Greenies have just ignored me. They've tuned out. You've fallen asleep like you're doing over there now. That's fine. I'll keep banging the drum. I don't intend to not be the champion of the community. They do need a champion that stands up to these property developers. They do need a champion. It could be one of us, 4 of us, or it could be 12 of us. But we are compelled to act in the community interest, the best interest of the public. Surely we can rise to the occasion. Surely we can say no to the people who want to bring their bags of money. Surely a photo opportunity for the Fourth Estate if they're over there. Is it really worth the photo op down at Christie Park to take all this money and to take all these stories of housing? Is that really what the VPA concept is all about? Come on. We are not so poorly mismanaged financially that we need to be completely reliant almost like a drug addiction to the VPA money, it seems. Can we not do anything in this council without taking property developers' money, I wonder? Please. Please. My appeal to you would be to vote on the original motions, quite frankly, not the stunt motion that you've compelled here. This is interesting, isn't it? You've got some interesting things here. You expect miracles from the Department of Planning. They sat on a proposal for 7 months, so you've given them 2.5 weeks prior to Christmas to comply with your conditions, Mr Mayor. I reckon in that time you'll probably get nothing more than an acknowledgement letter of your letter. Nothing more than acknowledgement. How about that? Isn't that extraordinary? Item E. Here we are, yet to exhibit any infrastructure planning to support the corridor. Are you kidding? Victor Dominello has passionately advocated for his electorate for donkey's years. He's got 7 new schools. He's got a new Catholic school. He's brought back the Peter Board High School. That's the one that your party sold, Mr Mayor. He's dedicated a primary school to the site as well. We've got a new Catholic high school. We've got a brand new Kent Road. Virtually the whole school is being redeveloped at Kent Road. New schools at Meadowbank, new schools, double capacity at Marsden High, double the capacity of Meadowbank, 7 new schools, and you think there's no infrastructure? Man, your glasses need a new prescription, I can tell you. But is that the only infrastructure? No, no, no. Well, there's hospital upgrades, there's road upgrades, there's a $100 million investment in the Macquarie Park interchange. Right in this corridor, there's massive sums of investment being invested by federal, state and local government. And we still whinge and whine and bellyache about no infrastructure. Well, it does take a hell of a long time to catch up after the 16 boring, corrupt, pathetic years of the Labor Party, because they invested in no infrastructure at all. You built nothing. Sorry, that's not true. You built half an infrastructure project, half a railway line from Chatswood to Parramatta. You stopped halfway at double the cost. Another small round of applause for half an infrastructure project. Thank you. It's very relevant. Well, you haven't... I'll reference item E. It talks about infrastructure. Please read the motion. You're going to sign off and give it the rubber stamp like the Labor Party normally do. Please read the motion before you rubber stamp your approval over there, Councillor Purcell. If we talk about... How silly are we talking about no infrastructure? There's tons of infrastructure in this place, but it does take a hell of a long time to catch up after 16 years of neglect. 16 years of neglect. How incredible. Point F is fascinating. Victor Dominello was a great champion. We are the only LGA that has an exemption of 2 years from the medium density housing code, solely due to the state MP Victor Dominello. No other MP was the champion of that cause. No other LGA in New South Wales has a 2-year exemption. Yet sadly, I haven't seen one damn thing from this council in 6 months since that exemption started. We've virtually not even started the LEP review process. Of course we need a lifetime permanent exemption in Part F. How ridiculous. You haven't started yet. You're given a reprieve and you've sat on your hands, Mr Mayor. Shouldn't surprise me, really. I know you too well. I was down recently at a... collecting some petitions for some signatures for a petition that numbers more than 5,000. I noticed the man from Meriton over there referenced about 5,800 workers in the construction industry. I can assure you, my friend, there are substantially more in number that are opposed to your development. I was chatting to one old-timer who's a great wit, and he came up to me and we got chatting, and he said, unkindly perhaps, I referenced you as a do-nothing mayor, Councillor Jerome Laxale, Labor. He said, no, 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 young man, that's not true. He's achieved a lot. He's very good at whinging, very good at whining, very good at bellyaching, very good at moaning, very good at groaning. There's 5 achievements for you, Councillor Brown. How about that for the list? Whinging, whining, moaning, groaning, bellyaching. How about that? What a wonderful checklist for 3 years in the mayoralty, and that's how the community think of you. I tell you what, if I was referenced in that way after 3 years in the chair in my second term and multiple VPAs where I've just simply rubber stamped it and approved it every time, I tell you what, geez, I'd be ashamed. I'd do what you did at the last council meeting, actually. As soon as the meeting's over, I'd get up and I'd run out that door. That's exactly what you did, and you had every right to do it too. You actually copped the scolding you deserved, didn't you? And you'll get it again from the community tonight. You'll get it again at the ballot box. That ballot box opportunity, I don't think, can come fast enough, near enough, soon enough, because I think resoundingly, and I'm told by Labor Party members, not from your faction, from the right-wing faction, in fact, that your performance over this issue is so bad that they've formally downgraded your seat and it's no longer a key seat. How about that? What a shocker for the Labor Party that is. You'd run so fast, you'd run so far, and now, of course, There are key seats that are winnable, and there are safe Liberal seats forever. No, you're damn straight it's not about politics. It's about opposition to the property developers. We stand united, my friends. We just say no. That's what our community wants. They want one view. They don't want about 15 here on your silly nonsense motion. They want one view. They want one unanimous view, ideally. They want to know their councillors are in their corner. They want to know their councillors are in their suburb, their neighbourhood, in their streets. They want to know, importantly, that I'm here protecting your street and not worried about the other bloke who's more interested in Macquarie Street over here and fulfilling his lifetime ambition. You'll still be the perpetual lifetime Labor candidate in 2035. I'm sure that Victor will have retired. The world will be a very different place, and you'll be, I don't know, still running. It's a marathon. It's a marathon, Mr Mayor. It's a marathon. I wish you well in that marathon. I wish to move we vote in seriatim on this motion. Well done for your trick tonight. Congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I might just wrap up debate before we move your procedural motion, just so we can get ahead. That was remarkable. Thank you. Councillor Clifton.
Thank you. Yes, it was rather remarkable. Thank you. Not in a good way. Look, there are two groups of people here today. There are those who are already committed to misinformation, and there are those who are open to the truth. Well, no, you can't say that. On the 28th of November 2017, there was a motion that was moved by Councillor Maggio, who, in fairness to himself, still stands by that. Yes? And Councillor Majali. Councillor Majali seconded this recommendation that Council submit the planning proposal for 112 Talavera Road, 112 Talavera Road, that's what we're all here for tonight, for gateway determination in accordance with Section 56 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, and request that the gateway determination is subject to a condition requiring the relevant planning authority to consider the outcomes of the Macquarie Park traffic model. It goes on. So, for all the carry on from the Liberals about Mayor Laxale, it actually probably should be called, well, I won't say Maggio and Majali, but it is certainly far more Maggio and Majali Towers than it will ever be Laxale Towers. No, in fairness to Councillor Maggio, he has stood up and spoken his belief and his truth, and that is a lot more fair than a lot of the ramblings that have gone on tonight. The simple truth is this: if you think that this council can stop this development, you are wrong. We do not have the power. This development is under a priority precinct. Therefore, no matter what we vote tonight, it is going to go to the Greater Sydney Commission if we vote no, or, as has been requested, it's going to go to the Minister of Planning instead. So that's it. So all we are doing is making a recommendation. So whilst all your consultation is important to us, and we take it on board, and I've always stood against overdevelopment, we simply don't have the power. The planning laws do not let us do it. I wish we did have the power. I really, really wish that this council, that all councils had power to determine what happens in their local area. We don't. It is state level. And it's as simple as that. Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor, and can I say I want to challenge one of the things that Councillor Clifton just said, and that is the namesake of this particular development, which I owe and credit to many of those in the community. Laxale Towers got a real ring to it. I'll tell you why it should be called Laxale Towers. Because you can talk about all the people that wanted to support the motion, those that didn't. But there was no Liberal that went on the record saying, as Councillor Brown said, it was the best deal for ratepayers that council could manage. In fact, it wasn't any Liberal councillor who admitted on Channel 7 News and then said to the local newspaper journalist that, and I quote, last year most councillors, including Councillor Alaxale, voted to progress the plans through to the early stages. I don't understand how any Liberal was on the record doing any of that. Then Ben Pike from the Daily Telegraph ran a story about how the developer had started to actually put up signs advertising the apartments before the approval had been even granted. And in that circumstance, when asked, the Mayor described the signs as cheeky. He said, oh, it's just cheeky, nothing to see here, it's all good. I mean, when he asked me, I said, and I'll quote what I said the sign shows that the developer is taking the community for granted. That's in the paper. I've got a few other articles here. When he was approached, actually, I think it was just last week, I think the local newspaper again said, at any stage, did you ever support the development? He said, then I quote the journalist actually, who said, well, he sidestepped the question. He ducked it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. We'll take your silence as an admission there. And then I think the best one is that finally, he's admitted now that after the community feedback, I've resolved now that I will move a motion and I will try and oppose it. And that is extraordinary because Councillor Pedersen stands up here and says it's the process. I can think of so many examples where this Mayor and his mob here, Councillor Purcell and Pedersen here and Councillor Kim, have gone out hardcore on a number of issues before they have even bothered to hear the proposal. And I'll give you an example. The last extraordinary meeting, I got up and I said, hey, I'd like to extend the public consultation so that people can have a bit more of a say. And do you know what this one right here said and this one over here? They didn't even let me speak to the motion. They didn't even let me say what the motion was. So don't get up here, Councillor Pedersen, put your light on and tell me that, oh, it's all about the process. You subvert the process constantly when it suits you and I won't stand for it.
And you were trying to extend
Who would have
it
thought?
to suit you.
Who would have thought that in April this year, when he said these things, that when he went on the record and said that it was a great deal, that we'd be here tonight with a motion that he's now trying to claim in his name to be up here rejecting it. I'll say one thing about that, and that is that it's actually a testament to many of the people that are here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you. Because if it weren't for you, I can promise you, he'd have stayed with the status quo and he would have let it slide through as he tried to in the first place. Yes, I campaigned really hard against this proposal. So too did Victor Dominello, so did Councillor Brown over here. But you didn't, Councillor Pedersen. And you didn't, Councillor Purcell, and you didn't, importantly, Mr Mayor. So again, I say none of this would have happened without you, ladies and gentlemen. You see, this Mayor will stare down even the best of advice, even the most rational of advice. We've heard a lot about rationality tonight. The only thing that moves him, and I'll give Councillor Maggio this, he's right, the only thing that moves him is the threat of losing votes. See, as a third-term candidate for Parliament, it's the sole focus. And as Councillor Brown said, when your seat's relegated, what do you got to do? You've got to run for votes. It's the only way that you can keep your relevance, not only in your party, but in your community. So the thousands of you that signed petitions, handed out flyers, called your friends and families, and ultimately made submissions actually moved this man. It wasn't me, it wasn't Victor, it wasn't Trenton. It was you. You moved this man, and for that you should be congratulated. And so this motion tonight, and like Councillor Brown, I have some objections to the procedure here. I have some objections. They talk about not wanting to be political, and yet it is littered with political lines here, and I just find it extraordinary. The Councillor Pedersen will again try and stand up and say you're making it political, yet look at the own motion here that I guarantee she'll support in full. She won't support seriatim. She won't support any of it. She'll accept it in full without even hearing the debate yet again. The motion tonight, whilst I support parts of it, the real parts, not the political parts, but the parts that affect the community, the parts about actually saying no to this VPA, saying no to Sydney's highest building, saying no to more apartments, more traffic congestion, all the things that have come through in the consultation, the things that actually matter, I will support, but I will not stand here and be part of this Mayor's political campaign. I won't stand here and continue to perpetuate all of this nonsense misuse of the council to try and promote oneself. I just will not have a bar of it. And I won't cop that I'm somehow part of this political campaign myself, because I'm not a candidate. I'm not a candidate and I'm not running for anything, and I don't need any of this, frankly. I do it, and the reason I ran was because I was concerned about these issues, and for you to question it is frankly a joke. And let's not forget, if you want to talk about the politics, let's not forget that 12 months ago, Councillor Yedelian actually put up a motion
to reject this development on the spot. And it wasn't allowed to be debated. It was stopped before it even got here. 12 months ago, the month after, you lot all voted in favour. What a joke. What an absolute joke that you would not even allow again that discussion to go ahead. So don't tell me that you haven't changed your mind because the political pressure has boiled up. You refused it. You all defended this proposal until you ultimately realised you couldn't defend it anymore. Well, you do defend it. You have defended it, and I've got the quotes here. In fact, I'm happy to table all of these documents right here. We can table all the evidence that says that you've defended it. I think it is an absolute joke. Didn't you think, when the journalists came ringing, that maybe the community wouldn't like to read that Sydney's highest building being built in their own backyard was something that you supported? I just find that absolutely extraordinary. Not once have you actually taken a position. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure that one of you even made a submission. I mean, you all talk about process, but Councillor Pedersen, did you make a submission? No. Did you write a submission like I did? I don't think so. Councillor Purcell, did you make one? No, I doubt it. Councillor Laxale, I'm sure he didn't make one. I just find that extraordinary, that you can come here now and pretend to somehow be on board with the community, put your money where your mouth is and have a say. Go out and get people to sign a petition. Rally the community. Send them, don't send them emails at the last minute to support your tricky motions. That is extraordinary.
Councillor Pedersen, if you could please refrain from interrupting
the
speaker.
All of you have done nothing to object to this development, but you come here now expecting to be lauded as some sort of hero for standing up for the community. You're not heroes. You're more like clowns in a circus, juggling, backflips. It's the biggest backflip we will ever see in the history of this city. 63 stories worth of backflips. You could write a Guinness World Records entry into this thing. It is extraordinary. It wasn't until last week that Councillor Majali has been out on street corners with me every weekend. He has put his money where his mouth is on this. You guys, the silence is deafening. I just find it beyond a joke. It wasn't until the Weekly Times that are here tonight actually confirmed that he'd finally switched his position last week, only, and they quote, to put him at odds with his own staff who still support the plan. Now, with respect, whilst I disagree with the staff on this matter, at least they have some integrity in their position. And Councillor Maggio, I'll give you that credit as well. But this mayor and his merry band of supporters, they've ducked and weaved. They've got technical with terms to try and weasel out of the argument. The best part, though, they talk about process. Well, when someone dares to speak up, they find themselves under formal investigation by this mob. They actually refer people to investigation for calling out their support on this development at a cost to ratepayers. It's just, I cannot believe the double standard of you guys. It's just beyond a joke. And the worst part, I think, of all of this was the excuses he made for not being able to take a stand. One of the speakers said here tonight that, and it's actually true, that he said, and I think it was that, we couldn't possibly, I was forced to accept the VPA, we didn't have any other options. But as it was said, you didn't support the VPA just up the road at 66 to 82 Talavera Road 7 times. You said no to that VPA 7 times before finally capitulating in the end anyway. And as the Speaker said, you slashed affordable housing by 54%, some deal. And then I like this one. The claim that, I couldn't possibly comment because that would be somehow in breach of the law without ever providing any statute or case law to support that fact. Well, I'm sitting here waiting for my legal summons. Please give it to me, because I've been speaking about this since April when it was first made public. So do not give me this diatribe about how you're somehow on board with the community, because you're not. You haven't put your money where your mouth is from day one. As I said, you didn't even make a submission. It's just, I find it extraordinary. And the worst part is that you think that by moving this motion tonight in your name, that the community is somehow going to forget the dreadful position that you've put us in. Well, we won't forget. We won't forget because you opened the gate. You opened the gate and you've let the floods drain in. And now we are in a situation where you have given the developer every opportunity they could possibly want with your comments on the record, and by allowing it through the process in the first place to be appealed, should it go to court. You've given them so many options, and I'm just so disappointed that I have to be part of a council that just seems to be so at odds with the community. I think the final thing, and I think this really does come down to how you guys operate. Because last extraordinary meeting when I wanted to extend, Councillor Brown and I wanted to extend the community consultation, we did so as a unified group. We did so as a unified group. All 4 of the Liberal councillors supported that in response to what the community had said. But when I look at the motion tonight, and I don't have it in front of me, but when I look at the request to have this extraordinary meeting, let's remember it is an extraordinary meeting. This was already on the agenda for next week, but we decided to pull it forward to 9 o'clock at night so people can't come. You did that without the signatures of 2 of your little coalition. So Councillors Kim and Clifton, I hope that's not an indication at all of your intention to support this thing tonight, because you were not signatories to that request. So I hope that you thoroughly support it. Well, that's a revelation. Thank you for that. And I've noticed a little regime, a little routine that's run when the Mayor makes statements by this group. And what generally happens is that Councillors Pedersen and Purcell in particular, they go out, like, comment, share. Oh, that's the other thing I didn't tell you. The notice for this we got through Facebook. I mean, some formal procedure. We got this through Facebook. I didn't get a notice of this. I think it was several hours later. Several hours later. But when the Mayor finally announced on Facebook he'd have this meeting tonight, generally what happens is there's a like, comment, share routine. Councillor Pedersen, Councillor Purcell, they go on and they'll make little, oh, well done, Mr Mayor, aren't you great, standing up for the community? Well, on this one, they couldn't have been further from the action. Our Mayoress in waiting over here, she was posting, oh, no, this is true, this is true. At the same time that the Mayor was making an announcement about this meeting tonight, she was posting about Brushy the bush turkey. And I'd say to you, Councillor Pedersen, where will Brushy live when this development is permitted and your mob gets all this stuff going through? He's going to be right up the creek without a paddle. And Councillor Gordon, you've been well behaved tonight, but for what your colleagues said to me, I can't help but say that I had a look on your page. So you didn't say anything, but I did notice that you're still listed as the Deputy Mayor. So I hope that you're not so wedded to the Mayor here that you're going to go along with this one as well. Well, it is, because I'm coming to you, Councillor Purcell, the self-proclaimed attack dog. It's more like a chihuahua, though. He didn't post anything either, but like most little yap-yaps, it's all bark, no bite. That's what he is. All bark, no bite. This is the most controversial issue in our city. And yet, rather than commit to residents that you'll see the development defeated, I was receiving emails from constituents, some who may be here tonight, saying my Mayor wrote to me, he told me to contact you, and he told me to contact all councillors because he wants you to all vote against this motion. So I wrote back, I said, well, of course I'm voting against this terrible proposal. I think it's shocking. But I thought to myself, if the Mayor really had control of this mob, if the Mayor was really serious about this, wouldn't he have guaranteed and made sure that he could deliver his team on this issue, rather than throw them under the bus, which is what he's done, hung them out to dry for the community to go and lobby them. I find that extraordinary. I find it extraordinary. So, Mr Mayor, I hope that you will, I hope that you'll get a better handle of your team. I'm actually somewhat ashamed to be a part of a council that's so inept of leadership. And that will continue, but I will continue to hold our local leaders to account. You've opened the door. You've opened the door. You've defended the proposal. You gave the developer every bit of ammunition they'll ever need to fight this in court, as I said before. And you've got the nerve here to come in here today and blame your political opponents. But you don't want to make it political, but you blame your political opponents. I will give you this. You want to repeat that?
You have gone out and lied to our community.
Thanks, Councillor Pedersen. Appreciate that. For the record, she said that I have gone out and lied to the community, which is a nasty thing to say. I'll give you this, Mr Mayor, and to your team. You are transparent, just not in the way that we'd like you to be, and we see right through you. This motion is flawed. I support certain principles of it, and I wait to see how you vote on the in seriatim motion. I think it is important if you're serious about putting politics aside, which we'll see again if you'll put your money where your mouth is, if you'll support that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Gordon. Sorry, councillors, we're past 11 o'clock. We need an extension of time to finishing this meeting. Do we need an extension of time, Mr Deeds, you're saying? Yep. Oh, aren't we? No, that's to continue the next item, isn't it? Because we're in the same item. Yeah, so we don't need an extension. extend the meeting time till the we extend the meeting time till the conclusion of this item. Moved by Councillor Gordon, seconded Councillor Pedersen. Thank you. Would you just please vote on that extension of time, councillors? Thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just before I start, Councillor Lane raised an issue of me being called Deputy Mayor somewhere or other, which is news to me, but maybe staff could check that out to get that changed. And while I'm at it, I'd like to say that Councillor Zoe has my absolute full support as Deputy Mayor. I think he's terrific at it. And while I'm on that note, I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the General Manager and to thank the Director of City of Planning for all the very extensive work that they've done on preparing this report, on all that it takes. Nobody's considering that at all, but I think it's a huge job that you've done, and I know that certainly most of the councillors here are very, very grateful for the work that you've done. Oh, crikey, where do you begin? I mean, really. So apparently Councillor Lane is rather upset about lack of community consultation. And I just can't get my head around it, because that meeting we had a year ago, that's what we voted on. We voted that it went to community consultation. That's what we did. And that's what's happened. And you know what? At that meeting, Councillor Majali stayed, but the other three Liberals, they got up and walked out. They got out and walked out. Check the minutes. Don't take my word for it. Check the minutes. 28th of November, 2017. They walked out. They didn't vote for community consultation. So what on earth are they on about? Instead, for the entire year, they've been out on the streets, whipping up hysteria over these towers, instead of giving it careful consideration, instead of giving you the full story. I wonder how many people are aware that if this proposal, this 42-storey version, is voted down, is not accepted by the Greater Sydney Commission, that what we then get is a 27, thank you, I couldn't remember if it was 7 or 8, 27-storey East European ghetto block. Right along Talavera Road, 27 stories. How high is that? It's as high as the Ryde Gardens. You know the top of Pittwater Road on Epping Road? Those two new towers that have gone up, they're roughly that height. Now imagine, right along Talavera Road, that height. And then up Herring Road as well. So if we vote against it, this suddenly becomes the possibility. They're allowed to do that already. I'm sorry?
Understate.
Understate, yes. So the people haven't really been given the full information when the Liberals have gone out and said how terrible 60 stories is. It's far more nuanced than that. I think Councillor Maggio had some very valid points, I've got to say. And I'm just going to come to my last point. I'm not going to go on tonight. My last point is this, that there is nobody in this room apart from myself who knows how I'm going to vote. Not even my colleague Councillor Clifton knows. I've kept quiet the entire time, and yet out in the papers, out in the media, we are constantly being accused of having already decided. We haven't decided. We haven't made our recommendation. We haven't done it. This is what happens tonight. That's why we're here. So all this stuff that's been going on, that Councillor Brown, and Councillor Lane and Councillor Majali and Victor Dominello have been whipping up. It's just outrageous because it's been misleading the community. It's been misleading you. It's been giving you lies, false information. Now, I've heard the Mayor. He stirs the possum occasionally. But I haven't heard a single false word from him on this issue. Not a single false word. Nor from his colleagues. So I just think the whole thing has been absolutely outrageous. I find myself in a position where I don't know that I'm capable of being able to give a clear, well thought out response to this. Because we've been politically pushed around, politically cornered left, right and centre. I don't know how Meriton feel about this. They've been pushed around too. The people have been pushed around. It's just a terrible state of affairs. So I'm not even going to tell you yet what I'm going to vote for.
May I ask a question to
Yeah, you may, yeah.
Thank you. Firstly, when did you become aware of the motion that we are actually going to vote upon with the 8 parts to it? And secondly, were you just apologising to a property developer?
You don't have to answer that, Councillor Gordon, if you don't want to. It's up to you. It's not a decision of mine.
I'll take it on notice.
Yeah,
I've
sure.
got to know what
Thank
all
you.
it's about.
So we've had a motion to consider this item in seriatim, moved by Councillor Brown and seconded by Councillor Lane. Thank you. Council deal with this item in seriatim. Please vote, councillors. Voting in seriatim is lost. The motion's there, councillors. If you could please vote. Please vote. The motion. We're just voting on the motion in my name and in Councillor Kim's name. Councillor Maggio. Do you want to press abstain, Councillor Maggio? Yeah, that's fine. You're happy. You're well within your right to, Councillor Maggio. Thank you, councillors. That's the end of the meeting. We'll see you next week. Thank you.